Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Orkan, the tier 8 pan-European destroyer. Now, according to the wiki, or the description, the Orkan is an M-class destroyer built for the Royal Navy, but transferred to the Polish Navy shortly after being commissioned. Despite similarities with Lightning-class ships, Orkan boasted stronger AA defenses, which were reinforced at the cost of a reduced number of torpedo tubes. Now that's something that you can actually already see in game, the fact that you only have one set of torpedoes on the Orkan. And these torpedoes are not the Lightning's 8 kilometer, almost 16k hitting torpedoes that reload in 96 seconds. No, these actually have 12 kilometers of range, and if you're running the module, they do a very impressive 80 knots. They also reload in 70 seconds, which is quite impressive, but just like most pan-European DD torpedoes, they do very pitiful damage at 10.7, and considering you're only launching 4 of them, 4 10.7k torpedoes are not exactly impressive. They're fun to throw out every now and then, and you can catch ships off guard, especially with RPF. You can catch other DDs off guard, and it can help you in taking out cruisers and BBs, just like any other torpedoes. But ultimately, the actual torpedo impact is very, very negligible. In fact, if you hit anything with a serious torpedo belt, well, 10.7, 40k divided by half, 20k, even if you land all torps on the belt. So, not exactly an impressive torpedo alpha value on this thing. It has the same 3x2 120mm guns as the Lightning, slightly less health at 18.5 compared to Lightning's 18.7. It does not have Lightning's amazing concealment. This was nerfed shortly before the release of the ship, so instead of having a 5.5 kilometer concealment like the Lightning, they tuned it down to 5.9. This also affected the plane detection slightly from 2.5 to 2.6. Not a big difference, but something to keep in mind considering Lightning's concealment is god tier and this one is lacking that advantage. That's not the only difference though. Well, you do have the secondary, but honestly, the secondary is complete trash and basically entirely useless. I've seen it fire a couple times. In fact, I built the full meme build, focusing entirely on the secondary, and the secondary basically does nothing. So in terms of firepower, you're entirely identical to the Lightning. However, instead of having access to things like smoke, you have radar. And of course, instead of having hydro, you have heal. So some pretty significant changes compared to the Lightning. The radar is pretty standard, 20-second duration, and you can of course run the radar upgrade, which I'm running here, giving me 20% increased radar duration. That gives me 24-second radar. The range on it is 7.5 km, and for this reason the Orkan actually gets away with having only 5.9 km concealment, because if you fight something that outspots you, you can instantly radar them in return. So they spot you, you counter radar, and you get vision of them. Now, this works in theory when you're fighting ships that you outgun. You're fighting ships that you can beat in straight up gunfights. It works really, really well. Oh wow, tracking torpedoes still very buggy. But, of course, the issue that the Orkan faces is what happens when you fight higher tier ships, higher tier DDs. In fact, the Orkan is one of the most poorly scaling destroyers I know. It is incredibly powerful in my opinion at tier 8. It is so good at just chasing down enemy DDs, hunting them down, out-trading basically all of them and killing them off. With the help of your heal, your concealment, your radar and your forward-facing turrets, this ship is very, very good at just killing enemy destroyers. However, once you start facing tier 9, tier 10, you run into something like a Kitakaze, you radar him and he goes, well, I'm just going to start shooting back. And then it quickly becomes apparent that ultimately you still only have Lightning HE DPM. It's nice, sure, but it's not amazing. And the arcs are, well, as you can see, even at shooting at something so very close as this Benson, the arcs are quite considerable. And if you try to shoot any sort of long-range targets, well, it takes some adapting. It is very good at this exactly though. You find a smoked up destroyer, you rush in, you radar, and then you just blap him, well, blap and blap, you chip him down with your guns. Okay, good example of the torpedoes there. The Synob actually ate all 4 of the torpedoes, and he's still sitting at, what, 18k health. And he does suffer from the double flooding, but it still wasn't, even a perfect torpedo volley was not enough to take down a tier 7 battleship that isn't even known for any sort of exceptional torpedo belt. Once again, once you fight higher tier ships, doing that pitiful torpedo damage is not gonna have too big of an impact on the outcome. So when it comes to scaling, Orkan is trash. Very good against same tier, very good against lower tier, but it does not scale well into higher tiers. Another reason why it scales so incredibly poorly into higher tiers is the AA. The description lets you know that, wow, this thing has traded a whole torpedo tube, not to mention those hard-hitting torps for this, but more importantly, it's traded a whole torpedo tube to get improved AA. Now what this actually means is your AA range is still only 5.2 km, your continuous DPS is a complete meme, and instead of throwing out 1 flak explosion like the lightning does, you throw out 2 flak explosions. So yes, technically you've doubled the amount of flak, but going from 1 to 2 flak doesn't really make much of a difference on this thing. In fact, one of the reasons I chose this commentary, this vid in particular, is because you're gonna see me get continually harassed by the Ranger. And I'm gonna be reinforcing sector, I'm gonna be basically doing all the things you normally do, AA off, and then when he pops up you reinforce sector and so forth. And I'm gonna shoot down, well, I've shot down all the planes I'm gonna shoot down this commentary. 1 plane. That's all I'm shooting down. Regardless of all the effort I put into shooting down these planes, the AA simply isn't powerful enough to do anything about tier 6 planes. Now, obviously Ranger doesn't exactly represent the peak of carrier terror, so when you do face higher tier CVs, they have a field day of farming you, and there's not much you can do about it. In fact, when it comes to playing the Orkan, it's a fairly difficult ship to play, because ultimately you have to be extremely careful with how you pick your fights. You're not particularly fast. You still have that lightning class speed, which means that with a speed flag you do 36.8 and then you got an 8% speed boost on top. Not exactly impressive. In fact, a multitude of DDs are gonna be much faster than you are. You have no smoke to disengage with. So you're neither fast nor do you have a smoke. So if you do push up and you do take these fights and the fight turns against you, it's very hard to disengage in this ship. Ultimately, I feel like the ship is quite balanced for what it does. I mean, you gotta remember, it still has radar, and radar is a huge advantage because it means that you can stealth radar with a 1.6 km buffer. In fact, you can push into smoked up ships like Smolensk, Minotaurs, whatever, and you can radar from outside the smoke and just let your team absolutely devastate them. And they have no warning besides, well, knowing, oh shit, the enemy has an Orkan on their team. So the influence you can have on the game is significant, but the ship is very difficult to play. Torpedo power, lacking. Gunner power, well, it is a lightning ultimately, but unlike a lightning which can conveniently smoke up and farm, this thing cannot. And it has 11.6 km gun range, and as you've probably seen from some of the shots I'm taking, this ship doesn't exactly make itself a good gunboat. The shell velocity is so poor, and add in the poor speed, you're pretty easy to shoot right back at. So getting big high damage games in the Orkan is difficult. It is, however, I've noticed, very good at turning games into wins. For the simple reason that when it comes to DD hunting, excellent. Just like basically any radar DD. In fact, I'm getting very much USS Black-esque vibes from this thing. The Black is also a ship that is really good at hunting down enemy DDs and killing them, but then not really that impressive at anything else. Obviously, you're not going to be running IFHE on this thing, because your main purpose is hunting enemy DDs, and these 120s have a base pen of 20mm. Enough for DDs, not enough for anything else, and IFHE is not going to change that either. Base fire chance is 10% with flags, so as you can see against this MC, pretty good at fire starting. If he gives broadside like this, switching to AP is absolutely an option. I turn out a bit late. I get a fire on him now. I'm gonna go for one more volley to get a fire on the back of his ship, but then I decide, you know what, I can't even pin his armor, so there's no point. Better to just drop some torps, and if he keeps giving broadside, we can maybe farm some AP hits on him. Basically get some damage in. I think the Orkan is pretty fun, actually. I've been enjoying it. It's a fun ship, especially with the combination of RPF. Basically, RPF points where the DD is coming, you drop your incredibly fast torpedoes, you push up, you radar, and then you start engaging the enemy DD. They're caught off guard by the radar, they already got super fast torps coming at them, and the entire team has gotten time to line up. Basically, even against higher tier DDs, you can get the advantage. The problem becomes the follow-up, when they start firing back, and their team starts firing back. And that's when the Orkan no longer does quite as well. Land a torpedo on the NC, start a fire. Ultimately, the question is going to be asked, do you think this ship is worth it? Well, I think it was something like 10.7k doubloons in the armory. And considering you can get the Cossack for cheaper, it's a hard sell. I mean, it is a fairly unique playstyle in the sense that it is a radar DD that doesn't have a smoke. A bit of a tier 8 Småland, except with no AA whatsoever. You see that I kill him, I'm reinforcing the sector every time this carrier goes in for a strike, but as you can probably tell, my AA damage has just broken 10k and we're not shooting down any planes whatsoever. Very pitiful. It's a unique playstyle, and at the start I didn't like the Orkan too much, but the ship has grown on me, and if you don't get too badly messed up by the being up-tiered, which does happen a fair bit, it is actually quite fun. It's a challenge to play it. You have to kind of plan out your engagements. If you just go nose in, gung-ho, taking the engagement, that one heal is not going to keep you alive from the focus fire, because on the other DD, once your radar runs out, he's going to smoke up, and he's going to be safe. You don't have that option. Ultimately though, a fun ship. And I do want to highlight, there is a giveaway in this vid. If you type Orkan giveaway, I think, well, I'm gonna have to check it with Wargaming, but if they don't provide an Orkan, I'm gonna provide one instead. So regardless, you will be getting one. Just follow my example comment. You type Orkan giveaway, what server you play on, and your in-game name. And I will draw a winner out of all the subscribers on my channel who commented. This game ends 156,000 damage, 6 torpedo hits, 4 kills, 9 fires. Confederate, high caliber, 3 floodings, and we did secure a cap. More importantly, of course, I am running all the flags on this thing, just to give you an example of what you can do if you combine the 200% daily bonus and all the flags. I literally played one game to get a commentary, and this was it, so pretty good example game in that sense. Team score-wise, 2.6k base. One plane shot down, as I mentioned, that one plane we shot down early, that was the only plane we were gonna get. So the description that says that this is that this ship boasts stronger AA defenses is technically true, but you gotta compare it to the original Lightning, which basically has no AA at all. So having stronger AA than the Lightning, it's kinda like saying you have better accuracy than the Richelieu. Not exactly impressive for people who know what that ship is like. Detailed report-wise, we have 6 torpedoes. We landed 6 out of 32, 47k, not exactly the most impressive alpha. We did get a fair bit of flooding damage, I think mostly on the Sinop and NC both flooded for a fair bit. Some additional fire damage, a bit of AP, a bit of HE, a mix of everything, and of course one plane shot down. 60k spotting, 500,000 potential. Overall, a solid 12-minute game and a good example of everything everything the Orkan can do and everything it struggles at. Let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, as usual, let me start with the modules. Consumable-wise, premium damage con, premium heal, premium radar, just so you have enough of them, and premium engine. Honestly, you can probably get away with running premium everything. They're going to change it soon anyway, so that's the only option you have. Upgrade-wise, turret survival, and of course that one torpedo tube, it's nice to have it up. The premium or the improved surveillance radar duration. If you don't have this one, then run the engine boost one. If you have neither, then run engine room protection. All 3 upgrades are great on DDs. The faster torpedoes, the torpedo tubes mode 1, which pumps up the torpedo speed to 80 knots, which is quite impressive and makes these things much more viable than you might think. Acceleration, because your turning circle is very, very good and your rudder shift is good, so you can get away with it. And finally, concealment. Captain build wise, I do highly recommend Jerzy Swirsky if you do have him, because not because of the AA, you're probably never going to shoot now 20 planes, honestly, but if you do happen to land 8 torpedoes, the boost is nice, but more importantly, that improved AR is a nice buff to have. If you don't have him and you're just running a bog standard pan-European captain, don't worry about it. We're talking very, very small min-maxing. It's not a big deal to not have it. Captain build-wise, priority target, last stand, survivability expert, concealment expert. Then get BFT for the guaranteed 10% reload, AR for even more reload, and finally RPF. The other build that I have been running is I skip RPF and I go superintendent and preventive maintenance. I thought that build was also quite nice because ultimately, even though RPF is a good advantage to have, because of the radar, you can live with not knowing exactly where the enemy DD is. If he spots you, you counter radar. If you spot him, well, you line up your guns, and then if he tries to disengage, you radar. The radar lets you choose RPF as more of a flexible skill than something that you're obliged to pick. Flag-wise, pretty straightforward. The basic flag, I'm actually surprised I haven't been running detonation flag. That's kind of must-have on DD. Speed though, you're very slow. Additional healing, kind of recommended since you give up a lot to get that heal, so might as well max it out. November Foxtrot, faster consumables, and fire chance on your guns. Flooding is nice. AA is kind of pointless. Actually, instead of AA, you should just run the detonation flag. This looks much better. I've been making fun of the AA, but if you want to know the actual values, you can see that the range is 5.2 and you throw up 2 whole flak, and those 2 flak can hit for 1.3k. Wow. And the continuous damage is 77 on the short range, 39 on the mid range, and 39 on the long range. Once again, well, you saw just how effective this was. And yes, it is better than the lightnings, because the lightning throws out only 1 flak. And he actually has better continuous, much better on the short range, but slightly worse in the mid and long. Ultimately, a pretty questionable trade-off, but they have given it that radar and heal to mitigate the issues this trade-off would otherwise cause. Orkan, unique? Well, it is a radar DD. Fairly unique. I wouldn't call it overpowered. I wouldn't call it weak either. In fact, in terms of balance, I think the Orkan is in a pretty good state. Really good against DDs, kind of crap against everything else. Uptiers very poorly, and in general, if ships choose to just straight up fight it, treat it as any other lightning, well, it doesn't treat that well, because the other ship can disengage, this thing cannot. 4-second reload with BFT. 4-second reload with BFT. Identical DPM. Actually, sorry, 1750 was the HE Shell Alpha. 1700. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta correct myself. The Orkan does have a very, very slightly better DPM than the Lightning. My bad. Good thing I double checked that at the end, so you can't laugh at me quite as much in the comments as usual. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and as always, I hope you guys had a great time, and I'll see you guys next time.